Hey, welcome to Fourth Space.
So I grew up in the Netherlands in a small town called Zwolle. So my first language is Dutch. And I kind of lived there until I was around 11 years old. I grew up in a small village or town called Zwolle, and we were like the only Black family around. And at school, me and my sisters were the only non-white kids. There wasn't even anybody else. Like we had two or three Turkish kids, but it was pretty much majority white, which is understandable considering that it was a small town in the Netherlands. We experienced a lot of kind of racial discrimination growing up, so it wasn't very nice in that aspect. But obviously, that is like where I grew up, so there is some loving or longing feeling of home when it comes to the Netherlands. We moved when I was 11 years old, so I was like in primary school and then moved into secondary school. Went to college here. I've lived in London for like 12 years now, if I'm doing the maths right, 11 years. And something I really loved about London, which for those of you who aren't from London or maybe traveling to London for uni, is really exciting in a lot of ways. It's super diverse, which is something that I wasn't used to. And it's very lively, like the city in general. So I moved to London. I was always quite artsy growing up. I went to do textiles design at college. And when I was in my second year of college, my teacher was like, I think you should go try and apply for this place called CSM. And before she said that, I'm going to be very honest, and it's going to be shocking to some of you. I didn't know what CSM was. I didn't know what CSM was. I had heard of London College of Fashion, which I'm sure everyone here has heard of, because that's the college they kind of promoted a lot in my area. I'm from East London. That's what they promoted. But my teacher, who was friends with a lady who runs the Insights program, her name is Bernie, you might meet her or you might already know her, kind of recommended the program she ran to me. So that's the first time I learned of CSM. I went home, I did lots of research, and then it said it was like the best art school in the world, like especially for fashion. And I was like, okay, I need to go here. I was like, I need to go here. Oh my God. So I signed up for the program that Bernie runs. And long story short, I got into the foundation at CSM, which was really exciting. I cried when I received my welcome to CSM positive application. I cried, happy tears. Um, but I came to CSM, and the first thing I noticed on the first day, I was super nervous for all the right reasons to begin with. The first thing I noticed was that it didn't really look like London. And when I say that, I mean, in terms of the demographic of students, it just didn't look like the diverse London I'd come to know and love. It was really strange. So I came in, and it was mainly there was a lot of like middle class Caucasian people and a lot of East Asians, like from that part of the world. But I didn't really see many or any, if I'm not being dramatic, Black students. And that was no Black males. Definitely, there wasn't any Black males in the foundation year, and there wasn't any Black women either. I think there was one other Black girl, and there definitely wasn't any hijabis. So there was nobody who really looked like me, except for one of the tutors, which I'm super grateful for. And her name is Patricia, or PC Williams. Some of you might know her. If you don't, get to know her. She's awesome. But she was the only person that kind of looks like me when I got into my foundation year. There was also one other brown girl that I can remember. She's my friend now as well. Her name is Hadia. We're in the same course. But yeah, that's the first thing I noticed. And I didn't necessarily feel super uncomfortable. And I feel like that's because I'm used to being the odd one out, due to my background growing up in Holland, blah, blah, blah. But it was strange in a lot of other ways because we're in London. And I just feel like if you're gonna go to a university in London, it should kind of reflect the demographic of the people in that city overall. Like it's quite strange. But I did my foundation year. I got through it barely. It was super stressful, super intense. And I found it quite difficult to make friends for lots of reasons. One reason was I was super shy and insecure. Another reason was because I felt like I couldn't really find many people that I could relate to. And it's not only because of race, but also a class and just the way we grew up. Just a lot of people I couldn't relate to. And also generally about foundation, everybody was quite catty because everyone wants to get into BA. So they're like, no one wants to share their work. They're like, don't look, you're going to copy it. And just even now, like a lot of people I used to barely speak to on foundation, or who I did become really good friends with towards the end, don't even speak to me now. I'm just like, you walk past them in the hallway and they act like they don't know you. I'm like, okay. That's besides the point. I'm going on a bit of a tangent. But I completed my foundation year. I didn't have many like big issues in that year. I don't feel like I experienced any discrimination in any way, except for the fact that I just didn't feel like I could relate to a lot of people there. I actually forgot to mention midway, like halfway through my foundation year, we had another Black tutor. Her name was Frances, and she also happened to be from like the same place as me. My heritage is Sierra Leone. She was from the same place, and that it was really nice to have her there as well. But I finished my foundation year successfully, and then I applied to do BA Textiles Design at CSM, and I got in. I cried again, happy tears. And when I got into BA, because you're mixing with a lot of the other students and you go into the main building with everybody else, there was a little bit more diversity. They also try to encourage us to kind of mingle with people outside of our course. So that's one of the reasons I feel like I got to meet more people and I saw a wider range of people. But even in my course, textiles design, in my current year of study, so I'm going to be in my final year, there's like, apart from me, there's like 2 other Black girls, no Black boys. And the rest of the class is the rest of the class is pretty much white Caucasian and a couple of East Asians as well. It's not very diverse, but it's much more diverse in terms of, if you look at the percentages than my foundation year was. The group is really nice, like everyone, we get along really well. And it's nice to see more faces, like different faces than I did in my foundation year. But I still don't feel like it's very representative of London. It's still majority white, the university, and that's for a lot of different reasons. The international students are mostly from East Asia. You won't really meet many other international students unless they're from other parts of Europe that aren't considered EU. And there's just not very much diversity is what I'm trying to say, which is difficult in a lot of ways, particularly when you're actually trying to have discussions on race or discussions on, I don't know, being from another minority group. For example, I said that I'm Black, clearly. I'm a Black woman, that's how I identify. I'm also a Muslim woman. And on both sides, I don't really feel like there's a lot of people I can relate to or even have discussions with where it feels like it's a safe space. I've never really experienced any flat out racism, I would say. Then again, I feel like my tolerance for racism is like super high because of my childhood experiences, which is very problematic. I don't think racism should be tolerable at all. And it's like gross and everything else, but I think my level of tolerance is like really high, which is really bad. It's like PTSD, it's really bad. I haven't experienced any flat out racism at CSM. I don't think I would say that, or at UAL as a whole, directed towards me. But I have had experiences where I felt extremely uncomfortable, particularly while having certain discussions. For example, to those of you that are at CSM or who will be coming to CSM, there's a part of the studies for BA, I don't know about the other courses, that is called cultural studies. And on that part of the studies, or in that sector of the studies, what you do is basically contextualize art and design. So there's a lot of talk on history, sociology, a lot of anthropology as well. And it's just all about placing design in context. So they kind of try to challenge us with a lot of different concepts and theorists and things like this. And one time we had a very interesting lecture on the idea of transracialism. I don't know if anyone else has ever heard of it. Not Shake?
Not yet.
Okay, well, when the topic comes up, you're gonna be shook because it's not nice, in my opinion.
I know what transracialism. I can't believe that was even a topic they even brought up. How could
Yeah, well, you know, they like to challenge us
a hot
intellectually.
mess. I've actually had an experience in photography class before, like when I was in secondary school, like a similar thing, and it's just a weird thing. It's a weird concept to even bring up.
It's
Anyways.
so strange. But basically, for those of you who don't know what the concept is, transracialism is basically the idea that race is a social construct, so it doesn't really exist. It's just a social construct, and therefore we can transfer from one race to another, and you can identify as any race that you want to be. So it's kind of like the idea of not the idea, but it's a concept of how gender is socially constructed. The same way gender is socially constructed, fact. Race is also socially constructed. I don't think it's a fact, but okay. So basically what they presented to us is a case study of a woman called Rachel Dolezal. And Rachel Dolezal is a Caucasian woman who was adopted into a Black family who identifies as a Black female. She kind of, I think it's a bit of a caricature, but for those of you who might think that transracialism is a thing, she basically tans a lot so that she appears darker. And she also does things to her hair to make it look curlier or more textured, to kind of mimic the likeliness of a Black woman's hair texture. So if you looked at her, a lot of people could mistake her for someone who looks maybe racially ambiguous. And she's kind of lived her life in that way for a long time, kind of just identifying and telling people that she's Black. So a lot of people don't actually know that she's not Black, or that she wasn't born Black, but she identified as a Black woman. So in the lecture room, they're presenting that lecture to us as if it's purely basically factual. And I look around the room and there's like 2 or 3 other faces that look like mine. And all of those faces look triggered. Everybody else is fine because they're just absorbing information. And that was a really strange lecture for me. In lectures, you don't really say much unless the lecturer asks you to say something, but we discuss these topics in smaller groups, which are called seminars. So later in the day, we went to our seminar groups, and the lecturer asked us, our lecturer for that seminar group asked us, so how did you find the lecture? And what do you think about the topic of transracialism? Is it possible? Can somebody transfer from being a Black woman to now being a white woman, or from being a Black man into a white male? I think this topic is super relevant to what's going on right now in the media as well. But the lecturer presented that question, and a lot of people looked at me to begin with straight away because they want to hear the perspective of someone who is Black. And I was triggered. And I wanted to say something, but I was kind of in my feelings, to be honest, and I didn't really know how to articulate what it was that I was feeling. And also I didn't really feel like being singled out because I don't know, I didn't feel comfortable to speak in that space either, because even in the seminar group, I'm like the only Black person. There's like 3 or 4 Asian girls, and everybody else is Caucasian. And this topic was about a white woman, Caucasian woman, transferring to become a Black woman. So I didn't really say anything to begin with, but then there was somebody in our class who had a very strong opinion, and they just began to say, basically strongly argue for the argument that you can identify as whatever you want. And I think in a lot of ways, I do agree with that. I think that we should all have, as individuals, the right to kind of identify how we want to. And generally, I think that as a society, we do need to accept people as they come. But when it comes to topics such as race, I just feel like it wasn't being handled with any sensitivity or care. And I don't know if that's because there wasn't much pressure for some people to be sensitive, because I was the only person who might get offended. But this person just was basically battering the whole class, but I felt particularly singled out. They were looking at me too, with the idea that, of course, if a white woman wants to identify as Black, then she is Black. Although there's so many other things which come with being Black, it's not just about the way that somebody looks. It's not just about our aesthetics. It's about our experiences and our lives and everything else as well. Like, I just feel like, I still feel like it's bogus, in my opinion. And I just felt like this person was being extremely insensitive, and the lecturer's job to diffuse the situation and kind of facilitate safe conversation wasn't being done properly at all. The lecturer didn't say anything. This person was basically going on a rant, and everybody was just looking at me like, what's she gonna say? They were all looking at me. And this person was basically, this person was very passionate, I feel like, over something which they didn't need to be that passionate about or have all that energy about. But I just felt like, I felt very triggered, and I felt very singled out. And that was kind of the most uncomfortable experience I've ever had being at CSM as a minority. Like, that was the most uncomfortable situation, because outside of that, I just personally haven't been made to feel as if me being Black matters really in any way, or I haven't been made to feel like me being Black stops me from achieving anything at CSM, or the way that my tutors treat me. But then again, my tutors in my course are generally very good. That's not the same across the board. Or maybe I didn't catch the microaggressions, because there's such a thing as microaggressions that some people just don't pick up on. But that was super uncomfortable. And recently, when the university put out a statement claiming that they are anti-racist, that's also triggered me. I don't feel that the university is particularly racist as an institution by itself, but I do think, and it's a fact, that there's such a thing as systematic and structural racism. And CSM, just because they build their ethos on inclusivity, is not exempt from that impact. And even outside of systematic racism or institutional racism, there are individuals within the building who express racist things. And I just felt like them claiming that they were anti-racist was very irresponsible. I feel like it was very premature also, because I think getting to the point of being anti-racist is definitely going to be a long and not very easy journey. That's not an excuse to not go on the journey, but I just feel like anti-racism is a destination which it's not been reached. We're not even halfway there. So for them to come out and make a statement amidst everything that's going on right now in the media, claiming to be anti-racist, I just find it very gross. And I don't usually really speak out against CSM because I genuinely do love it and I love being there. But in terms of racism and dismantling it, the university has a lot of work to do. And even looking outside of CSM, if you look into the broader University of the Arts London, if you can look at the statistics, and there's a clear influence of, there's a clear correlation between racism and even like the teaching body, the student body. There's clear evidence that the university is not anti-racist, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And that's I kind of did a whole rant, I feel like, but that's kind of where we're at right now. And from here on, I kind of just want to have a discussion about, I don't know, possible solutions, or just like other experiences, or how the backlash also the university has received from their post has influenced some of your feelings and emotions about CSM.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. I did a short course at CSM in 2018, and it only lasted like 3 weeks. But even being a white person, which is obviously I'm white also, but like I felt like they treated things differently when people were talking about their culture and European culture. So I remember a friend of mine who was doing like a project on South American art, and like people from Brazil and whatever, all these sort of things. And the tutor asked her to search about African rituals or something like that. And it didn't have anything to do with the work she was doing. And also I felt like it was very, a general perception of all things that are like exotic, because all these places that are like from southern parts of the world or not Europe are treated as sort of like a different thing. And European culture is something that can be very particular and right and different from like little countries. And I also remember that there was this Russian girl, I think, that wanted to do like striped clothes, and the teacher told her that she couldn't because it remember her of like Holocaust. Yeah. And it was very like double standards, because I mean it's a sensitive topic for you because you're white, but if you're talking about like African rituals, they're like very different in itself. Like Africa is not one country, and she treated as the same thing. And when she was doing like striped clothes, she couldn't because it was like Jews are super marginalized more than everyone else, So yeah, that was like my experience.
So problematic.
Yeah.
Something else which I kind of didn't mention because I was rambling, is that sometimes I feel like the tutors kind of, especially if you're like marginalized or minority, I feel like they kind of look at you and they just see one thing, like one dimension. So for example, me being a Black African student, I feel like there have been times where they try and encourage me to kind of talk about my Blackness, and like they like as if my work can only be about that topic, which is super problematic because when it comes to my white peers, especially if they're from the UK or EU, they don't encourage them to talk about that culture. They kind of say talk about anything else, kind of. They just don't try and I feel like they try and pinhole people sometimes as well to kind of just talk about that one topic. And I mean, in the case that you mentioned, I just feel like if we're going to be sensitive about stripes and a Russian person wanting to do a project about stripes, we should be sensitive about everything. But then at the same time, it's just stripes. I don't know. It also depends on the context of that person's project and their research. If they just want to do stripes because of the aesthetic reasons. I don't feel like that's necessarily an issue either. I don't know. I feel like tutors sometimes kind of put their own perspectives. They push it too much on other people. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents to what you said.
I think with culture, it becomes a thing of where, that's why I'm so keen for this space to be created and for everyone to be able to talk about their culture and how they feel about it, as everyone has a different view. No one's going to have the exact same view on stripes or on African rituals or on any topic, as everything's so broad and so rich. So I feel like no matter what you do, I know there have been like talks going around at the moment about in the past years, a student did a Nazi project, and they hung Nazi flags and things like that. And it's more so just about the attitude you have going into the project and about how you're going to treat that culture when you go into it and the light you want to show it in. And I think that's very important to remember. Like, if you're going in it with bad intentions to begin with, then you know the outcome is going to offend everyone. And I think, I remember in the cultural studies we had someone they wanted to do about Black culture, but then they said the reason why they weren't doing about it was because they were scared that people would be angry at them and attack them for doing this topic. And for me, it's a case of, if you feel like you're going to be attacked for this topic, then you're obviously not in the right mind frame to then take on this topic. If you feel like already you know people are going to be against it, then maybe it's not for you to do, and maybe you should look into other avenues. Because every culture has something about it. Even in the recent BA collection, someone was doing about the British culture and the flag and Brexit. Like, there's elements of every culture that's strong and rich that you can look into. It's about your perspective. Does anyone else have any input they want to add?
I wanted to say something. Anyway, so with my projects, I go to LCC and I do like TV and live events. And for one of the project that I just finished doing right now, I just wanted to talk about the racism and the misogyny that goes on even in lesson plannings. They might not necessarily notice, because all my lecturers and the people that plan my lessons are male and white. So our task was to record sound for a silent film. And when I watched, we had 4 options, and when I watched all of them, 3 of them were male and all of them were white, and 1 of them was a woman. And what they asked us was to record our sound, with our voices, use our home equipment, and record sound for us, a silent film. And the thing is, I when I was watching the videos, I felt like, how am I meant to make it seem believable that I sound like a white woman? It sounds weird because you can't look like what you sound like. But when I watch the videos back and I have to create content for a video, a silent film that I'm watching, I didn't feel represented. I didn't feel represented in the task that I was meant to do. I didn't feel a connection in the task that I was meant to do. I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I didn't see anybody that sounded like me. To be honest, at least more than half of my class is female, and having only one video that features a female voice is in a 5-minute silent films. It seems so weird for me. Do these people not understand? And the teachers, the lecturers are the ones that are picking the videos. So did they not watch it and think, well, we haven't put an option for people who are of color or people who are women. They've only put 1 video. And we were asked to, out of a list, we're asked to analyze like art from audio-visual artists. And we were given a list of 9, and not one of those audio-visual artists were Black or a woman. They were all male artists, and half of them, when I looked at them, most of them ran in the circle of one of my lecturers. So the one that was planning them, he's also a sound artist, and most of them were his friends, and they're in their 50s. And these people were making art 40 years ago. And I just feel like we've got people who, I'm not saying it's bad for you to be old and teach, but what I'm saying is your learning and teaching examples don't really represent your class, because to be honest, I'm not saying there's not that many Black people in my class, but not the majority of the people in my class are not white. So I feel like the content that the lecturers are choosing don't even represent the class that they're teaching. So I don't, it's something that frustrated me when I was trying to like pick something to analyze and pick a video to create content for, because I was thinking it doesn't really make any sense. The content that they're asking us, the stuff that they're asking us to do don't represent us. They don't even show anything to do with the class. They don't represent the class. I don't feel connected to these artists. Not saying I can't connect to white artists, but I'm saying that there's not even a choice to. There's not even a choice to connect to a female artist. There's no choice to write about a Black artist. There was not even a choice, and I couldn't write about anything else. And I feel like that just, the structure of it, and then I feel like they're not even aware of what was going on. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good to share, get it out. Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of the time they have a brief and they stick to the brief.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some cases it's great. You can really push it, twist it around, get your own perspective on it. And other times it's more constraining. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the idea of being constrained within CSM, maybe in certain projects? Or maybe you have a question from Memunatu about her time at CSM and her Pacific study course?
Could I say something?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what Ola's saying about like what sort of references they pick out and stuff, because my course, I do graphic communication design, and I'm at CSM, and they do a lot of, well, for my year, they do a lot of performative things that they think works. So for example, we had so I did an illustration pathway, and we had like one whole small brief where we had to do an illustration timeline, but they kept being really like adamant that you need to pick references from like all around the world and stuff like that. But it's just funny because I was working alongside obviously a lot of white students, and none of them really were engaging with the fact that these artists were of color or from different backgrounds or from different countries. They kind of were just doing it because they were told to do it. So a lot of the students, they don't really understand, well, it seemed like they didn't really understand the benefit of it, and they were just doing it. And the same tutor who was giving us this task is the same one who is really problematic. So I feel like they do a lot that they think works to sort of like please us momentarily, but they don't really know like what in the long term what will actually benefit us. So this same tutor has said so many like really weird, just wrong things to my face, to other people, but then they think they're doing something with like this whole reference thing, and they'll even give you references about racism if it's about that, but they don't understand it themselves. So I think a lot of the time the tutors, they really think that they're exempt from everything. Like even now we had this whole Zoom call with lots of other tutors and our course leader and things like that, and there were other students who were speaking about their experiences, Black students from previous years, from the year below me, I think, and they were, it's just interesting because a lot of the tutors that were on the call had specific situations where they were the problematic ones, but now they're kind of being like, oh yeah, we need to learn, like now we know we need to learn about these things, but they're not actually acknowledging the things that they've done previously. So I feel like I don't want to call it all performative, but I just feel like some of it, they still aren't being accountable for themselves, kind of thing. Yeah, so I feel like they do things that they think work, or they make excuses for it, but they don't actually hold themselves accountable and their other staff members accountable, like the people around them, because if like I've complained about staff members before, and they'll be like, oh no, he's too old, so we can't really do anything about it. So so yeah, I just feel like none of them hold each other accountable either. But yeah.
Can I just respond to some of the things?
Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry guys, I don't know how that happened. But I just wanted to respond to some of the things that were just said in terms of like teachers maybe making the effort to kind of be more inclusive sometimes. Like one thing that Ola just said is that she feels like the tasks that are set a lot of the time don't really represent the people that are in the class. So perhaps this was an attempt from a teacher to kind of do that by encouraging people to research beyond Western culture, or I don't know, something familiar. But then, like Mariam was just saying, sometimes, or a lot of the times, it does feel quite like performative, because it only kind of happens a lot of the time when somebody complains. So then the teachers are like, okay, here. But the problem with that is that even if the intention behind it is genuine at times, it's difficult to do it right, because there's no other teachers to kind of check with that can actually personally relate to the situation of many students. I feel like everyone's bound to make some mistakes, but I just don't feel like they're ever really gonna get it right unless there's somebody amongst them, like the staff teaching body, to kind of okay things. And I'm not saying that it is the job of BAME or like I don't know, Black teachers or Asian teachers or any other non-white teachers to kind of supervise activity that goes on. But what I'm saying is that if everybody in the room thinks that this thing that you're pushing is okay and that there's nothing problematic about it, then you're not really gonna come correct, if that makes any sense. So that's just my 2 cents about what Mariam was saying. I kind of just want to hear from you guys, like, how do you feel about the statement that the university recently released in terms of them being anti-racist, and how has the negative backlash or response from some current students to their Instagram posts kind of affected how you feel about CSM, or like any decisions that you're going to make even outside of CSM in relation to the University of the Arts London?
Personally, I just feel like the university is not anti-racist, because I feel like a lot of the things that go on in the university are quite performative. When I mean, like, in terms of activism, like one of my tutors that left, she was like the head of the course. She left and she was telling me a story about when the I feel like a lot of what goes on in the university is performative, because a while ago, when they raised the prices of university, the whole of the student body rioted, literally, like smashed up people's work, were protesting, and but they still raised the price of the university. I feel like they talk about safeguarding and protecting students, but still things go on. So I can't say they're anti-racist, because still problematic things outside of even racism itself, but the exploitation of students are still go on. Like, they haven't even addressed the situation with coronavirus and people having to leave university. If you cared so much about your students, people are signing literally signing petitions and stuff, and they haven't even addressed that, and they want to talk about them being anti-racist. You haven't even talked about the money. Listen, what really annoys me about university experience is that we are customers. We're paying to go to this institution, and I feel like sometimes we are disappointed. Sometimes things they're not making sense for what I'm paying. I'm a paying customer. If you're going to charge me this much, there should be a level of respect that goes on. And I feel like there's been constant violations of that said respect, or that customer is always right. I'm not saying they're always right, but I feel like we're not being taken care of outside of even racism. So for them to even say we're anti-racist. You haven't even fixed your main problems first. So I don't know what you're talking about anti-racist. Fix some of the structural problems inside of the university. I don't know if you guys been to, like, we only have one like activity. I think there's like 3 activity centers for students left in because they're building over, they're trying to make space for stuff. There's not even any like places where students can actually gather together. There's not that many. I think they keep on getting rid of them and like student spaces, and they're underfunding like student organizations and stuff like that, and they're not promoting it. And what I would say is, somebody said something really like interesting to me. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Somebody said something really interesting to me. I'm first year, so I don't know if you guys got it. Did you, when you like enrolled, did you have that positive mindset thing? Was it just me?
I think so.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
It's like, so the first day of enrollment, we had this thing where it said it's like positive mindset, and it's about thinking differently and being open-minded about certain things and what you think is the standard of like stuff like that. And I feel like even when I talked about I feel like an institution shouldn't be racist, the whole class went quiet and they were just easily brushed over it. And I feel like there needs to be something in the beginning of enrollment to say, this is what we're tackling. We want to be an anti-racist institution. If we're talking about being positive, we have to tackle the mindset of racism, because nobody, not even teachers, not even Black people, are above the systematic racism. We're born in a racist system. Like, regardless of how many books you read, you've still gone through the trauma of living within a system that is racist. You can't unlearn. It's not like you can't unlearn, but you can't change that experience unless you're born on the island. You've never bought. So you can't say, like, if you've never even addressed it in your whole, you've never even addressed it publicly as a university. How can you say you're anti-racist? You've never put in any of your policies. You've never said it out loud before that you're anti-racist. It's only now that you say that. It's not adding up. And I would say I go to LCC, I don't have one Black lecturer, and I have like 5. They have guest speakers and alumni that come in that are Black or BAME, but no lecturers, all old white men that are on the payroll. And even at reception, I don't know if you guys been to LCC, she's like an older Black woman, and she gives advice and like career advice and stuff like that. And I guess there's no, how do I say it in uni? There's no help there's nowhere to go when there's racist incidents. Like, I wouldn't know where to talk to. I'll talk to my lecturer. What if my lecturer is the one that's being racist? There's no way to. Sorry, I'm rambling. There's there's no place to say this has gone on. You can put up all the anti-racist talks or the Black boys on the couch talks that you want, and hire spaces out, or do lectures all you want. But if there's nobody safeguarding minorities or people of color, or most importantly Black people, from racism or their concerns, then how can you be anti-racist? How is there nobody to tell? There's no don't be racist signs. I don't understand. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was going to say there is a site, a part of UAL called Tell something, or Tell Me Something. It's linked to Student Union, and it's where you can go to report any sexual assault or any racism. I don't know from personal experience how actively well it runs or works. I haven't used it before, but that is an avenue you can go through. There's also other organisations like Stage of Noir, who are also there to help and increase the BAME students and staff. So if you feel like, and also 4ourth Space, like if you want to get in touch, to send us an email. If you're going through something, we should be, like I said, in September, we should be working on doing like a greeting for the new students coming in. So hoping the new students will be aware of this platform and a safe space they can go and talk about it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done. And I think that definitely needs to be worked on. But currently those are the limited, but they're there avenues you can use if you want to get further support and help. And then in the last 5 minutes, is there anyone else that did you want to like close it out with anything else you wanted to say or any advice? As she's in her third year, she's in her industry year. Does anyone want any advice on that?
I just wanted to make a comment. I think in terms of like what we need from UCL, from CSM and from UAL is that, so first of all, I think tutors need to, especially white tutors, need to be trained on anti-racism. I think they need to be taught that, for example, in a situation that Memunatu was in, like that tutor should have recognized, okay, there's a black student in the room and we're discussing race and she's the only person in the room. So therefore, it's her responsibility to protect that student. And I think it's extremely irresponsible that a tutor thinks that it's okay to exploit her in that situation and expect her to be the voice of all black people when discussing a racial issue. Like that should be something that automatically should have gone into a tutor's training as to how to protect students from experiencing things like this, especially when it comes to like ignorant white students, like suddenly, because automatically that's like you feel personally attacked, and it's irresponsible to put a student in a vulnerable position like that. Secondly, I would also say I think in terms of references and in terms of the way we're educated, what I find ridiculous is that, like, okay, so in situations that Ola was in those situations, there should be POCs included and black artists included straight away. And then in situations that Maryam was in, why do you have to have like a people of color week, you know? Like those things need to be weaved into the educational system naturally. When we're receiving references, we should be receiving references from black photographers in the same way that we're receiving references from white photographers. Because at the end of the day, they are both photographers. It shouldn't be like Black Photographer Week, because that allows, now you're pushing this idea of tokenization, and you're pushing this idea that like black photographers can only exist in a black photography space, and then that goes on to be pushed onto the industry. And those are ways of pushing this idea of anti-racism into the curriculum, where we begin to look at people as people and look at art as art. And then if people are being asked to reference POCs, then then students should be educated into learning, like, okay, if you are referencing, I don't know, like an African designer, then you need to make sure, and you're doing like an African inspired like collection or whatever, then you need to make sure, for example, that you're giving back to that community, especially if you're a white person. Like you need to make sure your references are on point, and then also your production lines are on point. Like you can't just be profiting off a black aesthetic and not representing, like not giving that reference like the correct foundation, because that's how you appropriate, and that's something that a lot of people are not taught. And that's why, for example, in the fashion industry, it's such a huge problem, because you have all of these white designers that orientalize things that happen in the East, and it happens a lot in black fashion, it happens a lot in modest fashion, where it's like, oh my god, it's so cute, like a hijab is so cute, let's put it on a white person. A abaya is so cute, let's put it on a white person. And it's like, that's why people need to understand, when you're referencing, you need to make sure that you're correctly referencing the culture and have an understanding of that culture before you feel like you have a right for it to inspire you. So that's my 2 pence.
That was £200, not 2 pence. It was good. I think obviously there's a lot to be said, but there's not a lot of time. Like time constraints kind of don't allow for it to be as open as a discussion as it would be nice to be. But I think
if you guys want to continue on, you can. I don't mind holding it open. I mean, we've got unlimited time, so you can hold it open if people want to stay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
but
outside of, I just feel like it's not a discussion. Even if you gave us like 8 hours, I feel like the topic of like race or like, I don't know, everything we're talking about kind of could go on forever and ever. But I think if we're trying to put some sort of time limit on it, it's just difficult to kind of properly express everything. I do kind of want to say that, you know, when I first kind of spoke out about, I basically said something against the university statement that came out. I had some people reaching out to me, and they were kind of saying that they kind of felt discouraged to go and study at CSM or UAL in general, because of like what I was saying and what some other people are saying, or because of like the accounts of stories that people have told on platforms such as UAL Truth, which is shocking, absolutely shocking when you read some people's accounts. But I just wanted to say that I think the reason people are sharing their experiences when it comes to race or even any other sort of discrimination is not to kind of discourage other people from entering the institution, but it's just to be able to share the experience and to try and tackle certain issues. For anyone that isn't at CSM yet, or I mean, everyone here is kind of at UAL already or joining soon, but I just wanted to say that to anyone who is considering, I don't feel like it should discourage them from coming, because I feel like if you, let's say for example, you say, I'm not going to go to CSM because there's some people that have experienced racism there, or because of systematic racial, you know what I mean, systematic racism, I'm not going to go to CSM or any unis at all. We're kind of handicapping ourselves from like progressing in industry or in any other aspect. I don't feel like people shouldn't go because of these accounts, is what I'm saying. I feel like we should go even more because of that, and kind of just carve out our space, and just create everybody together, including allies, just a more diverse and representative of the wider society, just like institution, as opposed to kind of discouraging people from coming or joining the institutions. Because with that logic, I just feel like anyone who is marginalized or a minority should just stay at home, basically. Don't go to school, don't go to work, don't go anywhere, because no matter where you go, you're going to experience some sort of discrimination. Yeah, that's kind of just what I wanted to say. And apart from like the incident that I mentioned, I do generally really like it at CSM or like at uni, just in terms of like being able to express yourself creatively and meeting people. And I still think it's amazing, except for that part, which is a big part. But I just don't want anyone to feel discouraged about joining that community or like going there, especially since they have this nice fancy label of best art school in the world. Do not go and go to, I don't know, somewhere crappy. I don't know. That's also problematic to say. But don't kind of stop yourself because people are telling you you don't belong in this space, you know? I think that's kind of my last little, guys, let's try and be positive. Don't let anybody stop you kind of 2 cents. And I just think as individuals, it's our responsibility to kind of be accepting of everyone, generally in the society, but especially if you're gonna go to an institution where you feel like what they're telling you, their ethos isn't really working out. I think it's a kind of community effort that we all have to make, although it is up to the people that are actually in power to kind of, they have to sort it out. It's not our job. But for example, if you see someone being racist, or even if they're saying something sexist or something homophobic, it's kind of our job to kind of call it out. I don't think we should, just because you're not personally affected. For example, let's say you're like Asian or white and someone is saying something anti-Black, you shouldn't just not say anything because it doesn't, you feel like it doesn't affect you because, oh my hat. Because it does affect you. It does affect you. It affects all of us. And I think that's kind of my 2 cents, last 2 cents. I think that's, yeah.
Right. Thank you, Memunatu. It's been lovely just to hear you talk and share and be so open about what you've gone through, and to the fact that I think it's for the hat back on.
It's like my wig.
Shifting. Yeah, I think it's just great that we can just come together and share and like try and support each other through these times, because I find that the more talks we do, the more stories get so similar, and the more people have such like shared experiences. Like just to be able to talk about it is such a big help. So I want to thank you all for coming out to 4 Space's first talk. We're aiming to do talks like fortnightly, and if you feel like you want to have your own talk, you can message us. You can get in touch via Instagram, which is 4space, or you can get in touch via email, which is 4space@gmail.com. And basically, yeah, we want to hear what you have to say in whatever format, whether it's going to be a talk you want to host with us, whether it's going to be a piece of work, a video, whatever it is, whatever format, whatever way you want to speak and have your voice be known and heard, we're going to be receptive of it, and we're going to be here for it. But once again, thank you all for coming out for our first talk. And yeah, I hope everyone has a lovely evening, even though it's so hot in England right now. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.